I'm going to ask her questions, right? And then we will move on to other people. I appreciate the motorcycle. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. People, I have set up some of your favorite debate TikTokers right here on TikTok. They're already in the guest box, so don't worry. It's going to be coming here pretty soon. We have people in the guest box ready to join up, ready to ask Marianne Williamson questions. People like Adora, AJ, Mike Bragandi. We have Blitz, right? We've got Lydia. Right, we've got lots of people, RTP, Dean, right, all your favorite debate talkers. I appreciate all the hand hearts and the hat and mustaches. Thank y'all so much, everyone. Nate, appreciate the raid, bro. Thank you so much. Thank you for the little crown. I appreciate it, Andrew. Thank you so much. All right, we're going to get people up here pretty soon. Also, critically as well. I forgot to add critically, but yeah, we're going to be getting people up here pretty soon. Appreciate that mustache. Thank you so much. Once she joins in, thank you for the galaxy. Thank you for all the gifts, everyone. I really appreciate it so much. But yeah, keep tapping that screen. Ashley, appreciate the subscription. Thank you so much. Thank you for the night. Keep tapping that screen. Let's try to get to literally 4 million likes, everyone. Tap that fucking screen. This is the first thing on TikTok. Appreciate the galaxy. Thank you so much. Appreciate the hanging lights. Thank you. And we're going to be getting her up here pretty soon. 2 minutes, everyone. 2 minutes until the time that she is supposed to be coming up here. I don't have her in the guest box yet. Once we see her in the guest box, we will be moving up. Pray no trolls. We actually have people particularly that I already set up to come up here today. So we're not going to have to worry about trolls, everyone. So trust me, this is going to be a professional, relatively professional for TikTok or something like that. Appreciate it, Elusive. Thank you for the galaxy. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. I'm confused who's texting me. But yeah, I appreciate everyone. Thank y'all so much. Appreciate the sunglasses. Thank you, Callie. Appreciate it. But yeah, tap that screen, everyone. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate the galaxy. Thank you. We're going to be getting her up here pretty soon. I'm going to drink some water. Y'all already know the deal, everyone. Again, make sure to tap that screen. Make sure to share the live, everyone. I breathe. I don't want people to tell me breathe. I'm fine. I promise. You don't know some of the questions I have set up, particularly everyone. We have stuff about economy and inflation. We have stuff about Russia-Ukraine situation. Thank you for the mic checks. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. We have stuff about climate change. Right, we have stuff about abortion. We have stuff about healthcare, about gun safety, about LGBTQ rights, about democracy, about student loans, about spirituality, about vaccines, about mental competency in terms of presidency, about age, about representation. We have lots of stuff particularly set up here for tonight in terms of the questions. It is 9:30, so she should be coming up here pretty soon. I do not see her in the guest box, but we will once she is ready. I'm going to message her assistant, make sure that she knows that we're ready and everything is set up for this particularly. Again, hopefully everyone has a great day, everyone. I'm live. Appreciate the handout. Thank you so much, everyone. Holly, I appreciate the subscription. Max, thank you for the galaxy. I appreciate it. I don't see her quite in the guest box yet, everyone, but give it a second, everyone. She should be here very, 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 very soon, everyone. Very, very, very soon. So yeah, just keep tapping that screen, everyone. You already know the deal. Share the live. We're going to be bringing up here people again pretty soon, y'all. I'm excited for this. Hopefully everyone is interested, everyone. Keep tapping that screen. Sub-only chat. I don't think we're going to be doing sub-only chat here for today. Maybe if it gets to a point, I might do sub-only chat. But yes, again, we're going to give it a few seconds for Marianne to join. I appreciate the firework. Thank you so much. This is about the time that she was expected to come up, everyone. So just give it a few seconds, everyone, and we're going to start it up. There's Marianne Williamson in the box. Everyone, welcome Marianne Williamson, future president of the United States. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate the dinosaur. Hello, what's up, Madam President? How you doing today?
I like the sound of that. Oh, wow.
I do like the sound of that, honestly.
Sure. Can you help me?
Yes, I got you. So in the bottom, you click the multi-guest option. It has like the pink and the blue, person. And then it should be like on the right side, you see like a camera and a microphone. Just click the camera and then click save if it comes up.
I thought we knew how to do that.
We did. I clicked the I did.
The multi-guest in the bottom, and then it should say your name on like the left and near the top. And then on the right side, it should show like a microphone, a camera.
Hello.
Do you see those?
Hey, we did it.
Thank you so much. It's good to see you. How are you doing today?
Thank you. And it's nice to meet you, Parker. Thank you for having me on. I'm going to try to okay. Hi, I think we're cool. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, good to see you. Good to see you. I'm glad to have you on here, especially everyone in the chat. This is definitely a first thing on TikTok. So I'm glad especially to see that you're interacting with like Gen Z and people here on TikTok. It's definitely great to see that. If you don't know, I do have like somewhat of a setup for like the interview and stuff like that. I have questions that I have prepared for you. And then also there are people that are in the community here, my age and stuff like that have questions that they have to ask as well. People of the left wing, some people have like different types of perspectives. Definitely very interested in hearing what you have to say and hearing like the plans that you have set out for the future. Is there anything that you'd like to introduce yourself with before we go on to those questions?
No, we can go on. I think people probably know I'm running for president of the United States for the Democratic nomination. I don't think that's news to anybody in your audience. So I'm just grateful to be here, and let's do it.
For sure. I do have one question first to start it off here real quick. It is quite the question. Do you think that current President Biden, is mentally, physically, and intellectually competent to be president of the United States?
Yes.
Do you think that Donald Trump is mentally, physically, and intellectually competent to be president of the United States?
I think the word competent and the word fit are distinctly different. Competent, yes. Fit, no.
Okay, so would you say the same thing for Biden as well? Do you think that Biden is fit to be president as well?
I think he is fit to be president. I think the issue of the president, which is always true when we are choosing a president, is you're not just asking about today. You're asking about the next 4 years. You're considering the stress factor. You're considering all of the things that we both think about in terms of anyone running for president, but which of course we're thinking about with someone his age. It's understandable. So I think the American voter does not need me to point out to them what the issues are there. And people can consider this for themselves.
For sure, for sure. How do you think that we can inspire young people to be more involved in politics when they feel so underrepresented by representatives in our country?
You know, if you look at the 2022 election cycle, young people voted. The old traditional line, oh, they don't vote. Young people today are voting for their lives. I don't see a problem at all inspiring young people. Young people that I know are simply looking for someone and something to vote for that would actually make a difference. Young people don't need me or anyone to point out to them what the issues are. They don't have health care. They don't have access to higher education. They don't have access to educational opportunity. They don't even know if they have if they can look forward to a habitable planet when their own children would be growing up. I don't think that young people need to be told how important all this is. I think young people need to be offered a genuine alternative to the status quo, which young people realize is failing them dramatically. And I hope that young people see in my campaign and in my agenda what would effectuate a genuine turnaround, a new beginning in this country, a cutting of the cord with an aberrational chapter of American history, which has taken us to where we are and which promises young people nothing.
Absolutely. I think that's great to hear from me, from many other people my age as well. Speaking of healthcare particularly, right, good and affordable healthcare in America remains exclusive for many Americans. Do you support the establishment of a universal healthcare system? And if so, how would you achieve such a goal given the political difficulties involved?
First of all, we should remember every other advanced democracy, plus other countries that aren't even democracies, have universal health care. I think that this is so important for the average American to realize, no matter what our age. Every other advanced democracy has universal health care. The reason we don't is not, as they say, because it's so complicated here. We don't have it because it's corrupt. We don't have it because of the greed of the insurance companies and their undue influence on Congress, which has turned our Congress, as the entire matrix of corporate tyrants at this point, turned our government into a system of legalized bribery. We don't even need that middleman. How would you do it? Well, it would depend on who your Congress is. I mean, no matter who the president is, what constitutes and who constitutes the House and the Senate is going to make a tremendous difference. But I also think, listen, if you support this campaign, I need you to do more than support me. I need you to support the Congress people who are running on a genuine progressive platform in your state. And for a third of you, that will also mean in 2024 a senatorial candidate. And remember also, whatever suppression you see of my, in this case would be my progressive voice in the presidential campaign, remember this happens on the congressional level as well. We have to start seeing politics and civic engagement as simply an aspect of a well-lived life. So yeah, if you want me to actually be able to effectuate things like universal health care, you're going to have to do more than elect me. You're going to have to elect a House and a Senate that is aligned with my agenda. But that's true of any president. I mean, no matter who the president is, they're hoping for a House and a Senate that is aligned with them.
Yeah. So speaking of like the corporate influence that exists, what would be your particular goals, right, to reduce the level of corporate influence on our political sphere?
Well, unfortunately, we're not, it's unreasonable to think we're going to be able to overturn Citizens United anytime soon, not given the corporatist makeup of the Supreme Court that we have right now. That should certainly be the goal. And I think your generation will be able to make that happen. I don't know if I'll see that in my lifetime. You'll be able to make it happen. And what you need to make happen, once again, won't see it in my lifetime necessarily. There needs to be a constitutional amendment to establish public funding for federal campaigns. This is disgusting. If you go to a place like Canada, the richest corporations, they don't have the political influence that we have here. In the meantime, until those things can be accomplished, there's only one way to override corporate influence, and that is with a revolution at the ballot box. It's the only way. It's the only way. And we have to do it, and we can do it if we choose to do it.
Speaking of radical change, right, in relation to climate change, you have called for a World War II level response to the climate crisis. What does this World War II level response look like under a Williamson administration?
I would declare a climate emergency. Once you declare an emergency, that gives the president power to override some of those corporate forces that at this point are so institutionally resistant to getting off fossil fuels. We need to ramp down fossil fuel extraction. What we have right now is a president who has overseen some healthy investments in green energy in the Inflation Reduction Act. The problem is he's given more oil drilling permits than even President Trump did. One of the first things I would do is cancel the Willow Project. We would lead to ramping down, not ramping up fossil fuel extraction. Another thing to look at is that $858 billion defense budget, the defense establishment in the United States is the single largest institutional emitter of greenhouse gases on the planet. We need what is basically like a Green New Deal. We need a strategized movement in the direction not only of getting off the fossil fuels, but also building up massive resources, whether it has to do with solar, whether it has to do with wind, whatever it has to do with in terms of developing green energy technology, which will also not only save the planet, but will also create millions of jobs. But we need to get at it. We simply need to get at it in a New Deal kind of way.
Yeah. Historically speaking, nuclear energy has not been popular with Americans and hasn't been a part of things like the Green New Deal and other sorts of things that have been promoted like within Congress and amongst progressives. Like, do you think that nuclear energy has any type of role in the transition from fossil fuels?
Let me tell you my problem with nuclear energy. So many people have talked to me about this, and I've read so much, and I understand that the technology is there. Okay. I do get that the technology is there. My problem is not technology. My problem is human beings. It's not that I don't think the technology has evolved enough. I'm afraid we as a human race have not spiritually evolved enough to the level of moral sobriety that is necessary to hold that much power. Let's try doing it without it first. Let's try doing without it first. So I don't think we should go immediately to it. Let's try doing it without that first.
Yeah, speaking of spirituality, you've referred to yourself as spiritual in the past. What do you mean when you say that?
To me, spirituality just means the path of the hearts. You know, there's a man named Dr. James Doty, who is a neurosurgeon at Stanford. And he wrote this really wonderful book called Into the Magic Shop. And he also has a new book coming out called Mind Magic. And I learned from James Doty some of what they've learned in neuroscience. Well, they used to think that the brain was the intelligence center of the body. They are now learning that there's more of a partnership between the brain and the heart than they used to realize, and that the brain and the heart together are really the intelligence center of the body. I see civilization the same way. The mind disconnected from the heart can be a dangerous thing. The mind disconnected from love, and that's what's wrong with the economic paradigm that now dominates this country and has become our governing principle. It is not corporatism is not just corporate power. Corporate power, corporations can be adequately regulated, and I'm not an anti-capitalist. What has happened over the last 50 years, though, is this really what amount to a malevolent strain of soulless capitalism. Adam Smith, who was the primary architect of free market capitalism, said that it cannot exist outside an ethical context. Ethics is spirituality to me. A reverence for nature is spirituality for me. Putting the health of a child, safety, health, and well-being of people before corporate profits is spiritual to me. Any stand for justice is spiritual, for mercy, for forgiveness, for rehabilitation of people's lives, for healthy food. That's if you're trying to have healthy food, healthy air, clean water. What is unspiritual is all the carcinogens in our food. What is unspiritual are the PFAS in our water. You say, what does that have to do with spirituality? Everything. Where is the heart in this? How can we in the richest country in the world tolerate the fact that we have the highest poverty level, that it's getting worse? You know, I'm going to New Hampshire next week. Do you know half the people in New Hampshire are food insecure? 129,000 children are hungry in Nevada. What's going on here? So spirituality is not just let's love each other. Spirituality is love expressed, not only in our individual behavior, but also in our collective behavior. And that is what Gandhi stood for. That is what Dr. King stood for. That is what nonviolent political philosophy stands for. And that is what I stand for.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer when it relates to that. When it relates to ethics, particularly like as an undertone of terms of how we interact with other people, do you think that there's some sort of supernatural undertone to your spirituality, or is it just like in terms of ethics?
I don't think anything is supernatural. I think there's just so much about nature that we don't know. I mean, look at the night sky sometime. I mean, there's a lot more going on. What is the Shakespeare line? And, you know, there's a whole lot more going on here. And one day we will realize those things aren't unnatural at all. They're not, you know, they're not supernatural. It's just more natural. There's more going on in nature than any of us have any idea yet.
Yeah, it's just yet unexplained. I absolutely love that. I love that response. Not to change topics, but in relation to the Russia and Ukraine situation, in 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine with no provocation or justified reason. President Biden has strongly supported Ukraine and the sending of arms to support their campaign. Do you support the Congress continuing to fund Ukraine in their campaign against Russia?
I do support supporting Ukraine, but let's not pretend there was no provocation. There was no justification. But it would be inaccurate of us to say there was no provocation. The United States does not have totally clean hands there. We played fast and footloose. What is the expression? With NATO, the Aegis missiles in Poland. So I wouldn't say it was unprovoked. We did poke the bear, but nothing that justifies that brutal invasion. And yes, I do support. Obviously, there has to be a negotiated settlement. We should be doing everything possible to promote that. However, I want to see a negotiated settlement in which there is a Ukraine.
Do you think that if the reason as to why Russia invaded Ukraine was based upon the idea that NATO was encroaching upon their borders, do you think that would have likely happened about 20 years ago? Right, when like countries like Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, right, joined NATO on the very borders of Russia?
First of all, I interrupted you there, so I'm not sure I heard every word that you said, and I apologize for that. Reason. Do I think we would the reason? No. But I do think we have to be very nuanced in our conversations about foreign policy. So I just don't think that it's correct to say, like I said, we poked the bear. Listen, I am for that support, and I agree with what you were saying. We have to think about Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. We have to think about the fact that Finland, which has wanted to stay away from NATO, now wants to be part of it. This is why I do support for Ukraine. All I'm saying is that America needs to always be willing to look in the mirror and look at our own part in problems wherever they're part of our own experience.
Yeah, I would very much agree with that. What specific policies do you support to try to bring about peace to the region and end the war?
Well, you know, it's funny, I was on the Katie Halper show earlier, and Bobby Kennedy and Cornel West say, we just got to promote peace talks like a ceasefire. I said, Katie, what do you think is going to happen if we say, okay, let's have a ceasefire? You think Vladimir Putin's going to say, oh, okay, You really think that's what's going to happen? That's the problem we have here. So on one hand, of course, we should be promoting talks. On the other hand, we should realize both sides consider themselves winning right now. And it's not like, people say, well, if we just come to the table, there'll be peace. We come to the table, Vladimir Putin would say, oh, that's great. Yeah, absolutely. Ceasefire sounds good. The idea that would bring peace, Vladimir Putin is a brutal dictator. He's a brutal imperialist. He has already demonstrated the way he has conducted this war. Not that you can really say we expect humane behavior, but there are some rules of war and some level of humanity, the kidnapping of children, the raping of women. Yes, I'm sorry, what was the original question? I mean, should we promote, listen, there has to be a negotiated settlement. A negotiated settlement is the only thing that's possible. But like I said before, let's negotiate in a way and at a time when Ukraine gets the best deal possible. And in a way that will not mean that he'll just keep coming. If he just keeps, that's why people say, I really resent it when people call me, some of my opponents call me the pro-war candidate, they're the pro-peace candidate. Because if we just all of a sudden stop supporting them, it's not like there's going to be peace. What we're going to see is something atrocious. Putin would have no reason to stop, and the destabilization in Europe would be something to concern us deeply.
For sure. Going on to the economy, inflation, many Americans have felt the pain of rising inflation over the last year. What policies do you support to rein in inflation and grow the economy?
The problem with inflation, first of all, there's an aspect of inflation that is cyclical. A lot of inflation has to do with pure corporate greed. But the deeper issue for me is not just the inflation or its consequences. The deeper issue for me is that for the majority of Americans, they can't absorb what are otherwise natural cycles of inflation. If people had universal health care, right now we have 1 in 4 Americans living with medical debt. If there weren't over 40 million Americans living with a college loan debt, if people weren't paying so much to go to college, if people had free childcare, if people had a guaranteed living wage, if people had guaranteed housing, then cycles of inflation could happen and you could absorb it. That's the problem. You have 20% of Americans who live in an economy that's pretty good, that's working for us. But the issue of an economy working for you includes the fact that if something terrible happens, I can absorb it. I can ride the wave. You have the majority of Americans who not afford an unexpected $400 expenditure. That's the problem. It's that when inflation comes, there's no wiggle room. For the majority of Americans, there's no wiggle room. That's why I want fundamental economic reform. What even the president represents is the alleviation of stress. We need fundamental economic reform. So universal health care, cancellation of the college loan debt, tuition-free college and tech school, free childcare, guaranteed living wage, guaranteed housing. Right now you have 1/3 of America's workforce who live on less than $15 an hour. Half of them cannot find a place to live. Americans need to realize the level of pure human suffering that is going on out there. The 70% of Americans say they live with constant economic stress. Of the 1/3 of our workforce who live on less than 15, half of them cannot find a place to live. And many of the people who are homeless in America are actually working full time. That's the problem. So we keep talking about inflation because the establishment figures who want to talk about inflation don't want to talk about the fact that they have created and maintained and perpetuate a system which makes it so hard for people to take any hits at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of student loans particularly, how would you address the student loan crisis in America and the growing cost of education amongst individuals that have accrued debt, not particularly just like the tuition-free aspects, because that would be like removing the impact on future Americans, but not necessarily the impact on the current millennials, right, and Gen Zers that have already taken out hundreds of thousands of dollars of student loan debt and stuff like that.
I want to be a transformational president. And what that means is I want to have a long-form conversation with people. Because otherwise, if we just come in and fix a situation here and there, the same kind of situation will inevitably recur. This is the issue. Those loans should never have existed. We had tuition-free college situations before the 1970s. We had a situation in the University of Florida system, University of Texas, University of California. You might remember the last election cycle, Elizabeth Warren talked quite a lot about how she had gotten a world-class education for very, very little money, something like $50 a semester. This was predatory capitalism, vulture capitalism at its worst. It has tentacles. It's like a heat-seeking missile for wherever there is a profit center. And that profit center is higher in places where people are desperate. This is why we have 1.3 million people rationing their insulin. You don't have this in any other advanced democracy. It is outrageous. It's nothing other than greed. We don't have healthcare because of the institutionalized greed of the insurance companies. We have the people rationing the insulin because of the institutionalized greed of the pharmaceutical companies. And we have those college loan debts for the same reason, institutionalized greed. So I say that because I think the president, Franklin Roosevelt said the main job of the president is not administrative. The main job of the president is a moral vision. I want to have a deeper conversation with the American people so that people really understand this is the moral basis of eradicating that loan debt. The moral basis is that they should never have occurred. The Declaration of Independence, which is our moral mission statement in this country, says that God gave inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness to all men. That governments are instituted to secure those rights, not thwart those rights. And what you were talking about Gen Z at the beginning. What has government done for Gen Z except thwart your dreams? Thwart your dreams. We should treat a younger generation. I've never seen a generation in American history exploit and cut off at the knees a younger generation like is going on right now. It's outrageous. For those of us who have children, you set your children up to win. You do what you can, and then you hold them accountable, but you give them the means to win. And that's what education is. And that's why everyone in this country should be able to achieve as high a level of education as their achievements will take them. And that's why I would use the full powers of the executive branch to do everything possible. Some people say that the president could have, if he'd come right in at the beginning and canceled everything, there would have been less of an ability to mount resistance to that. And even now, there are those at the Debt Collective and so forth who say that he could use the higher education bill to completely eradicate. I can tell you I would try my best every single day.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking about the amount of conversation and communication that exists, how would you increase the amount of communication and inspire unity amongst Americans in a time in which there's seemingly so much division?
By doing exactly what I'm doing now, laying it down for real. I would have an honest conversation with the American people. People are so gaslit in this country, and the dots are all disconnected. And you can tell that, even when they're telling you the truth, they're not telling you the whole truth and nothing but the truth. One of the biggest powers of the presidency is the bully pulpit. And I would use it, just like President Roosevelt had those fireside chats, and people would sit and they would listen to the radio. I would try to be very honest with the American people, the way I'm trying to be very honest with them right now in the campaign. You would get the same level of honesty from me. And that goes back to the fact I'm only running for one term. And the reason I say that is because I want to govern as a president who, in a way that you couldn't even think of doing if you were trying to get reelected. I want to use the full powers of the presidency. That has to do with who you appoint. That has to do with who you appoint to head these agencies. We would not have a former board member at Raytheon as our Secretary of Defense. This is outrageous. You wouldn't have people from Big Ag in control at the agriculture department. My whole presidency would be about purging the system of these kind of corporatist tentacles that have way too much power, corrupting influence on the U.S. government. And I would use that power. I would use the power of executive orders. Not that you don't want to govern by executive orders, but when necessary. And most importantly, like I said, I would use that bully pulpit. I would lay it down. I would be real. I would talk about hungry children. I would talk about the poverty rate. I would talk about economic injustice. I would talk about the system being rigged. Things would be different.
Yeah, and I think that's a great thing to hear. Well, my one concern, I think the concern would probably be more felt by like people in the chat or people that might not necessarily be able to interact on this sort of level. How could we necessarily trust like someone who would be considerably like in the political sphere, right, to only necessarily be there for one term, given that we've seen people like Biden promise one term and then also, even after he finishes the one term, continuing to want to run again, even in a circumstance in which many Americans would see him to not necessarily be mentally or physically or intellectually competent to be president of the United States?
Well, anytime you elect a president, you're just kind of crossing your fingers and hoping that they're telling you the truth. The president didn't actually promise one term. He said he sees himself as a transitional figure. And everybody sort of assumed that in a way. He never actually said, I only want one term. Listen, 67% of Americans wish he'd move on. For me, this is how I see it. I only want one term, first of all, for the reason I said to you. I couldn't do what I want to do if I was seeking to get reelected. I want to give this country, and think of it as a body with a chiropractic adjustment. This government needs its heart back. And to be honest, the American people need their spine when it comes to political issues. I'm 71 years old. At the end of one term, it will be time already. It will not be time for another baby boomer at that time. It will be time to hand it over to a younger generation whose turn it will be at that point. You know, generations come and generations go. That's the way of nature. And I have other things to do before, that I want to do before I die. I have a grandchild. It'll be time. Let me just in there for 4 years. And then I got some things I'd like to do in those last few years of my life. So, I could be lying, of course.
Yeah, I definitely would say, along with other people probably in the comments section, it does seem to be more trustworthy coming from an individual in which doesn't have as much of a political sort of presence as someone like Biden has, given that he's been in office for decades of which and whatnot, and will continue to look for re-election. But we have hit that point in which it is 30 minutes. So I was going to go on to people in which I have set up to ask other types of questions, other type of people that are in the debate sphere on TikTok. So I have people particularly to bring up questions. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we move on to that aspect?
And I'm here. I don't know. Did somebody tell you I only have 30 minutes?
Oh, no. I set it up. I split it up particularly for the first part for me to ask questions. And then for the second part.
Other questions, whatever I can. Otherwise, I'll sign off, whatever's right for you.
Oh, yeah. The second part here, I have people that are like debaters here on TikTok as well, like myself, that have questions that they prepared that I've asked them to come up and ask, so that we could have other types of perspectives to come up. I'm going to go on to the first person that I have here particularly. Their name is Blitz. They're a mathematical physicist, living in Europe, progressive aspect as well. So he probably has a question particularly here. And then we have the next person, who her name is Adora. But what's up?
Parker, do you need my video on?
Oh, you don't have to have your video on. It's fine like this, Blitz. You're good.
All right. It's 3:30 in the morning. I probably am not fit to be on video. Hi, Ms. Williamson. It's a pleasure to hear you speak. I appreciate all the questions that you're answering. So this might come completely out of left field. I'm a former graduate student and currently a postdoctoral researcher. And myself and many of my colleagues have seen the exploitation of some of the most highly trained individuals by the institutions that train them. This comes in the form of PhD candidates. These are people with master's degrees and so-called adjunct professors who hold PhDs, teaching classes of hundreds of students, having no consistent contract and sometimes getting paid barely more than the local minimum wage. In the case of the graduate students of the UC school system, this recently led to the largest strike in the U.S. higher education history. I'm sure you remember hearing about this in the news. Now, I understand that these people are by far not the worst off working Americans in any sense of the word, but the poor treatment is driving people away from pursuing research, which is leading to a decline in America's dominance in the scientific community. As president, how would you address this kind of brain drain that we're seeing because of this exploitation by universities?
Well, first of all, you said that this was a question out of left field. Actually, this is a big question right now. I had, as one of my Firelight chats, I had a panel with University of Michigan grad students who were going through exactly what you were saying, were barely able, some of them were living in their cars, some of them were selling their plasma. Grad students. Now, this was at the University of Michigan with a multi-billion-dollar endowment. I'm happy to say I'm happy to say that ultimately these students were successful in their strike and did get their demands met. I'm happy to say, but it was difficult. But what you're pointing out is very, very true. And what you said, the result of it is very, very true. People not even going. The idea that somebody's in graduate school, particularly one of these world-class institutions that has these multi-billion dollar endowments and is selling their plasma to be able to live, it's so outrageous. Now, you have to talk about what is the power of the presidency. We don't have a king, we don't have a dictator. So I can't just go in and make them not do it. But you know what I can do? I can do what you and I are doing right now. I can mention it. There is such a thing as healthy shame, and I can definitely make it known. In a case like that, I would make it known. I am on the side of those grad students, and I think that it is shameful that in the United States of America, in our world-class educational institutions, that we are not doing everything possible. This is what I didn't understand about University of Michigan. Your grad students are your crown jewel. Your grad students are your crown jewel of achievement. You should be doing everything possible. And this is what I was meant before. What are we doing? Shouldn't we be helping our young people thrive? If you want America to thrive, America can't thrive if Americans don't thrive. So, look, the president can't come in and, tell the regents of the university of any place what they can and cannot do unless what they're doing is obviously illegal, and then the president himself or herself can't just make it stop, but can support all actions taken against them. And in a case like that, what I could do and what I would do and would have done as president, if I had been president when that was going on at the University of Michigan, absolutely, you better believe it. I would talk about it, and that's not nothing.
Blitz, do you have a response to that, or do you have another question that you'd like to ask before we go on to Adora?
You can mention it.
No, I know that you wanted to do maybe one, and then you might come back around for a loop later, so feel free to go on to somebody else. Thank you for having me.
For sure. Thank you so much, Blitz. I appreciate it, man. All right, we're going to go on to the next person. We're going to get Adora up here real quick. Again, everyone, we're going to be moving on to, again, more of our mutuals. We have lots to set up, particularly. We have a few left, everyone. What's up, Adora? How are you doing?
Doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me, Parker. And it is an honor to speak with you today, Ms. Williamson. I have one big question that I would like to ask right off the bat. The transgender community in the United States is under attack. We are losing rights to things like life-saving gender-affirming care for both adults and for children. So my question to you is, what will you do to protect gender-affirming care across the nation?
The transgender community in the United States is under attack. And one of the first things I would do as president is to establish special protection status, which is not nothing, which is extremely important, and which I would also lean on my Department of Justice to make sure that all violations of civil rights would be at that point very vigorously investigated. So special protection is what I would grant to transgender Americans who, as you said, are a targeted community.
Fantastic. I absolutely love to hear it. If I have time for another question, Parker? Yep, fantastic. Would you support incorporating LGBTQ plus queer topics into schools, and what would that look like?
Well, the president doesn't have that power. The school agenda is under the control of the states. I would definitely express my opinion. What's happening now, for instance, with the suppression of people even learning about our racial history. I heard somebody on television. Who was it? Hold on a second. It was a celebrity who wrote a book about two daddies. I can't remember who it was, but I was just listening to it the other night. A darling children's book about a child with two daddies. This is the kind of thing children should be learning about. We should do everything to support tolerance and knowledge and embrace of others. And this is a banned book. I would definitely speak out about this. Once again, the president doesn't have the right to say, you can't do that. That's not the system we have. The president has executive power where the president has executive power. But would I speak to it? Absolutely, I would speak to it. I would be glad to have I think it'd be cool to have a transgender story hour at the White House.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Let's do it. That's a date.
Okay. Would you say that the Democratic Party is doing enough to protect trans rights?
Well, I don't think you can't really say that the Democratic Party is the Democratic Party doing enough to, the president has not granted special protection status, which I would do, but I don't know if you could make a sweeping comment about the Democratic Party itself. I don't think that can be said. I don't necessarily say that.
All right. Thank you so much, Adora. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for asking your questions.
Thank you, Parker.
Have a fantastic
Thank you,
night.
Ms. Williamson. You guys have a good one.
You as well. You as well. All right, let's go on to the next person. We have Will particularly next. We have lots of other people to bring up real quick, everyone. Again, Marianne Williamson, I appreciate answering all the questions, as these are great questions. Go ahead, Will.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have two questions kind of on two different topics. Wonderful, absolutely fantastic to speak to you, Ms. Williamson, and thank you for letting me up, Parker. I really appreciate it. I wanted to touch on two things, and forgive me if they're terribly critical. You said you wanted to talk real, so I just want to really hit the spirit of that and just lay some things real down. Because you call yourself not anti-capitalist, but then you also criticize the imperialist policies of Russia, and you claim to be anti-imperialist in a series of policies and views. And I want to just hit on a microcosm of that. I don't understand how those concepts can fit comfortably together, right? So specifically on things like land markets, how can we suggest that we should have a free market of stolen land? So I was wondering if you could elucidate us more on how you believe that those ideas can work together, on how we could have a free market on a fundamentally imperialist or imperially founded country and, world.
Well, first of all, we don't have a free market. That's the canard. We don't today have a free market. We have a market which is dominated by corporate monopolies. We have a corporate matrix, insurance companies, pharmaceutical companies, big food companies, big agricultural companies, big chemical companies, gun manufacturers, big oil, banks, and defense contractors. That's not free market capitalism. We have a form of capitalism, a malevolent strain of capitalism. You can call it trickle-down economics. You can call it neoliberalism. You can call it vulture capitalism. It's capitalism having gone off gone off the rails. It's deviated from any moral center. Now, some people say, and this is where the argument is, and I think perhaps you and I would have this debate if we were at dinner. You would say, from what I hear you saying, you'd say, well, capitalism inherently is that. I agree with Richard Wolff. Capitalism is not a light switch. You either have it on or off. It's not like that. Institutions evolve. Institutions transform. And that's what I believe. And I believe in the transformation of a system. And let's not get stuck on words. I mean, if you're going to say, okay, let's end capitalism, and it's kind of like, I'm in a business where I'm a writer, okay? So I have an experience of the upside of what is a free market. I write the book, the publisher publishes it, the consumer buys it. Everybody wins. That's a free market. That's a righteous mark. And it's the high side of capitalism. Everybody wins. Everybody puts in energy and takes energy out. But that is different than corporatism. And that kind of small business upside of free market capitalism is consistently squashed in this country by this behemoth of this corporate matrix. But this corporate matrix of corporate tyrants, and it is tyranny at this point, it is economic tyranny. This is not free market capitalism. Adam Smith, who was the primary architect of free market capitalism, said it cannot exist outside an ethical center. So you and I would definitely agree that the way the economy operates today has no ethical center. It is a soulless form of capitalism, which feels no ethical responsibility to people or to planet or to other species. It sees stockholder value as the primary good. It has led to that $50 trillion of transfer of wealth into the hands of 1 to 10% of Americans. It is tyrannous, and it needs to be repudiated. And that's what I believe is going on with the labor movement being regenerated today, and also with campaigns like mine.
Wonderful. And if I can just one more kind of pushback question on that, quite specifically, right, regarding stolen land and anti-imperialism within America, how can we justly
stolen land as in Native Americans?
Yes, absolutely, like First Nations people.
Okay.
How can we justly engage in any form of like free market or any form of like capital with land under a capitalist like America while calling ourselves anti-imperialist? Right. I'd love to get a direct answer on the land question.
The imperialism of someone 200 years ago is different than the war machine of imperialism, which is in our generation in such things as the Iraq War. So the answer is what was 200 years ago. I mean, we can make records, but when you talk to Native elders, and I certainly have, there are such things as in 1864, we did sign a treaty saying that the Black Hills of South Dakota would be given back. The Black Hills of South Dakota absolutely should be given back to the Sioux. And you wouldn't be disturbing the government of South Dakota. So many broken treaties and unfair treaties. But in terms of the fact, I mean, you could look at any country. You could look at any country in the world. Somebody 100 years ago or 200 years ago stole that land.
Understood. Absolutely. And I really do appreciate the direct answer. Once again, just setting down real. I do appreciate it. Parker, I have one more topic I want to address, if I can.
You and I could have a good hour-long conversation.
Absolutely. I hold lives as well. You're more than welcome. Sorry to plug myself, but you're more than welcome. Hit me up. But the other question is, I do spend hours and hours of my day, basically every day, just like Parker, just like many people on this live, deconstructing and discussing religion. And one of my biggest concerns about you, Marianne, and as well as quite a lot of people within politics is the active engagement in spiritual and religious language, at the very least, the language and heuristics of religion, right? I believe you call it the path of Christ, or a conversion to Christ, was a lot of your work and a lot of your discussion. So my question is, how can you earnestly, if you were president, if you are an elected official at all, earnestly engage in what is a fundamentally secular and valuably a secular system, right? That's an incredibly important American value. You reference Gandhi and other social leaders as referencing religious heuristics. That's entirely fine from my book. I think religion and religious heuristics is helpful in social movements. But in terms of earnestly being president, earnestly using the bully pulpit, secularism isn't just in what our laws are, it's also how we make and create them. So I'm just wondering how you would engage in that and how you'd respond to that.
First of all, I refer you to the second inaugural address of Abraham Lincoln. That's number one. I hope that when you get off the phone, you'll go read the second inaugural of Abraham Lincoln, because the whole thing's about the Bible, and Lincoln did okay. That's number one. Number two, you've never heard me in any of my political campaigns use religious language. I am a Jew. So as a Jew, as a religious minority, no one needs to remind me how important it is, our tradition of secular language when it comes to our political dialogue. I'm very clear about that. And you have never heard me in my political speeches, my political talks, anything you heard tonight. I don't throw anything in there because it doesn't belong in there. When you talk about humanitarian values, you can get it all done. You don't have to use religious language. I spoke at a church in Atlanta the other night. Because it was a church, it was a black church in Atlanta, I was totally free, because in the black churches, there hasn't been this division of progressive politics, so you're free. Outside that context, you haven't heard me do it as a candidate, and you would not hear me do it as president. When it comes to the larger issues, however, once again, go read the second inaugural.
Wonderful. Well, I'll get out of here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Will. It was great having you on, man. Thank you so much. All right, let's go on to the next person I have set up here real quick. Particularly, we have Lydia, if you know Lydia, of course. All right. What's up, Lydia? How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing great, of course.
My phone is lagging a bit, so hopefully that doesn't mess anything up. Very nice to meet you, Miss Williamson. I have a question that I hoped no one else would ask. I am vegan, and I am interested. According to the Humane Society International, experts found that dietary shifts could contribute up to a fifth of the mitigation needed to hold warming below 2 degrees Celsius, and that policies operating across the food system would allow for more sustainable land use management, result in greater food security and low emission trajectories, contribute to climate change adaptation and mitigation, and improve public health? Do you have any intentions regarding subsidizing more plant-based options and making them more readily available for people, especially in low-income areas?
Yeah. I hope that you will go to Marianne2024.com, read about animals and animal factory farming and ending it, and I hope that you will read about food as well, because the facts that you just stated are correct.
Yeah, I appreciate that. There's a lot of people, even on the progressive side, do tend to ignore the fact that animal agriculture is one of, if not the biggest contributor to global warming, and it can be slightly frustrating to not hear from other people on the left speaking about that as well. So that is the only question that I had, and I totally will go to your website and read up on that, but it's amazing speaking to you.
Read about animals and about food.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Lydia.
Parker,
Appreciate you coming on. Appreciate you coming on.
All of that.
All right, everyone. Next person we have particularly is Dean, everyone. Y'all already know Dean. What's up, Dean? How you doing, man?
I'm doing all right. Thank you so much for letting me up, Parker. First, I'd like to say, Miss Williamson, it is a pleasure to meet you, and it is a pleasure to be up here. So my first question that I have for you pertains to women's rights, and specifically abortion rights. So as we all know, in 2022, Roe v. Wade was overturned, effectively, eradicating federal protection to access to abortion. And the fallout since that has been 22 states outline abortion with specific legislation on week marks, and then about another 3 states that have mixed results and are expected to ban abortions. If elected president, do you intend to introduce any form of policy to protect the access to abortion on a federal level?
I would do everything possible to do that. And of course, a lot of that will have to do with the makeup of the House and the Senate. I would be willing to at least carve out, if not eradicate, the stand for the eradication of the filibuster in order to codify reproductive freedom.
And what are your specific takes on the issue? Do you think that, abortion should be something that is a protected right for the women within the U.S.? Should this be a thing that no matter the state in which one presides in, as long as they preside in the United States of America, they should have access to this form of healthcare?
Yes, I do. I believe that abortion is a moral issue. But I believe that it is an issue of private morality and not public morality. I trust the moral decision-making of the American woman. I think that the vast majority of women only take part in abortions from the deepest place of reflection. It is not an easy decision for a woman. And the last thing she should have is the government telling her what that decision should be.
Thank you so much. And I just have one more question, if that it's okay, Parker. And this just has to do on maybe some more explanation on some of the things that you've talked about. I know that you're an advocate for economic policies aimed at reducing income inequality. And specifically, I believe you're an advocate of a UBI, or a universal basic income. Is that correct?
Well, this is how I feel about universal basic income. The economic stress of the average American is so great at this moment that I am open to anything to try to right this ship that is listing so far to one side. For that reason, UBI, I'm a supporter of UBI, but let's be very clear. It does not answer to the fundamental flaws of vulture capitalism. So I think I could see something like a 5-year, right? Because basically, if you look at the American Rescue Plan, we saw what happened when people were handed checks. So yes, handing people checks is a very good idea. You know, they've done that study recently in Canada about what people spent the money on, who were homeless, who were actually given some money. But I would like to see it something like sunset within 5 years, let's say, so that in 5 years it could be reconsidered. Because if you have universal health care, if you have tuition-free college, if you have the cancellation of the college loan debt, if you have my economic bill of rights, if you have free childcare, if you have paid family leave, if you have guaranteed housing, if you have guaranteed sick pay and guaranteed living wage, we will get to the point where the UBI would not be necessary. So my support for it is as a stopgap measure.
Okay. And how do you plan to fund this?
Well, you know, it's interesting when people ask that. How did we fund the Iraq war? And how do we fund the 20 years too long that we stayed in Afghanistan? And how did we fund the 2017 tax cut, the $2 trillion tax cut, where 83 cents of every dollar went to the richest corporations and highest earners? How do we fund the obscenely bloated military budget? And how do we fund all those multi-billion-dollar corporate subsidies that go to industries that are already making billions of dollars in profit, as well as in many cases poisoning our food, poisoning our air, and poisoning our planet? We have the money. It's about, and I also want to point out, this is your money. This is your tax dollars. And not only that, when you help people thrive, okay? When our money is spent, this is about wealth creation, okay? When you help people thrive, that's where money comes from. Money comes from the creativity and productivity of the American people. The American people are so beaten down right now. Help people have people who have higher education tend to make more money. People don't have those college loan debts will start their own businesses. Help people thrive, there will be a greater tax base, and that is the way we will pay for everything that is needed to put this country back on track.
Well, thank you so much for answering my questions. I once again, I really appreciate, the opportunity to come up here and ask you this. And Parker, thank you to you as well. Have a phenomenal night.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. I did want to ask Marianne, just to make sure that we aren't going over too much time. I do have lots of other people that would love to come up and ask questions. If it is too much to continue on after the hour mark, because I did only bring it up to about an hour, let me know.
I'm getting up tomorrow morning. I'm going to Detroit, and so I don't want to spend too much longer, but maybe two or three. Is that all right?
Two or three more? Okay, for sure. I'll definitely try to make sure to get to them. Everyone who I do not get to, I really apologize, everyone. I'm going to try to get to as many people as I can. So 2 to 3, everyone. Again, I did promise more people, but I appreciate it, everyone. So let me go on to the next person. Again, everyone, I appreciate it so much. Let's go on to the next one real quick. All right. Yo, what's up, Mike? How you doing, man? Hey, what's up, Mike?
Marianne, how are you? So, I just had a question about education. So, students across the board in America, they're failing across the board. University enrollment is declining. Kids are feeling uninspired in school. They feel like, social media is distracting them. We're also seeing the effects of this in terms of the lack of innovation in America, the lack of scientific literacy. So, how would you reform the educational system at the most fundamental level so that kids can be more reinvigorated in terms of, critical thinking skills and things like that?
Okay, well, you brought up several topics, all of which are important. First of all, when it is true that we are doing very poorly in relation to educational results in other countries. But let's be very clear here. White children living in privileged neighborhoods are doing just fine. So the first thing we have to deal with is the fact that we are the only country that has so much of our educational funding provided by the tax basis. It is absolutely wrong. It is immoral that a child's education is determined in such large part by how much money their parents have, even in public schools. So one of my goals, just like John F. Kennedy said, within 10 years, we will land on the moon. For me, within 10 years, we will have every public school in America will be a world-class palace of learning and culture and the arts. That's number one. Number two, you talked about the role of social media, the distractedness, et cetera. You're probably aware that the Seattle School District is actually suing the tech companies because it has now been established that there is not just a correlation but causation between the number of hours that these kids spend on their tablets with their ability to sleep, their ability to focus, their ability to learn, and so forth. So I very much support that suit and would say so and do everything possible. In terms of college enrollment being down, because what you're pointing to, the horrors are just every day we learn more. I mean, we have kids graduating from high school who basically can't even read. But then also we have to look at the fact that we have millions of children in America who are traumatized before the age of 5. The question at this point is so much bigger than education. The question is childhood itself. American childhood itself is the problem. This is why I want a Department of Children and Youth. I've met principals at elementary schools who tell me they have children on suicide watch. Like I said, we have children traumatized before preschool. We have schools where there aren't even the resources to teach a child to read by the age of 10. If a child cannot learn to read by the age of 10, the chances of high school graduation are drastically decreased, and the chances of incarceration are drastically increased. The cradle to prison pipeline is a very real thing. We also, you were talking about college enrollment being down. We also have teachers quitting. Teachers saying, this is not what I signed up for. I didn't sign up for crowd control. I didn't sign up to have to take care of behavioral problems. This is why I'm saying we have to have a larger conversation really about the state of the American child. A lot of the people, by the way, who aren't signing up for college, though, is because of the expense of it and taking on those lines. The only other thing I'd say about that is taking on those loans. The only thing I'd say about that is I think that the American child is the greatest collateral damage of ultra-capitalism. They're not old enough to work, so they have no financial leverage. They're not old enough to vote, so they have no they don't represent a political constituency. They would be my greatest concern. If we want this, for us to have the country that we want 20 years from now, which is when you guys' lives are blossoming, you're full power in 20 years, then we're going to have to take better care of our 10-year-olds today. We know now things about the brain of early childhood that we didn't even know 10 years ago. That's why it's got to start before education. It's got to start before preschool. We have to deal with the fact, just the last thing I'll say about it. You think we have a mental health crisis now. Wait 10 years from now, when you'll have a generation coming into adulthood who, when they were in elementary school, were praying every morning, dear God, don't let me get killed at school today. So, Believe me, I'm honored about the American child. But to be honest, it's a bigger context than just education.
And then, thank you for that. And then last question real quick. How would you defeat Donald Trump, right? His tactic is to be very aggressive. He calls you names and all these things. So how are you going to go in there, attack, and defeat Trump?
My nickname for him would be Donald Darling. This is the deal. Franklin Roosevelt said, we would not have to worry about a fascist takeover in this country as long as democracy delivered on its blessings. Donald Trump is not the cause of the problem. He is a symptom. The problem is corporate greed. Corporate greed has given us a system in which democracy is not delivering on its promises. If democracy was delivering on its promises, we would have universal health care and so forth. I will defeat Donald Trump by making him irrelevant. I will defeat Donald Trump by presenting to the American people such a better alternative. The people who love Donald Trump and are going to vote for Donald Trump are going to vote for Donald Trump. Some of them are going to vote for him even if he's in jail. That's not the biggest threat to the Democrats in 2024. The biggest threat is how many people would stay home. And if all we do is provide a status quo politician to just continue doing what they're doing now, that's my concern, is how many people would stay home. I will provide an agenda that people can actually get excited about because it would make a visceral difference in their lives.
Great, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Man, I appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much, bro.
Bye.
All right, we're gonna go on to the next person. I think that we have time for 2 more people. Is that good, Marianne? For sure. Let me go on to the next person. I apologize to literally everyone I did not get to. I apologize, everyone. What's up, Lux? How are you doing?
Hi, how are you? I did not know I was gonna get added up. So, hi, Miss Williamson. How are you?
Fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing good. So I just had a few questions for you when it came to the BIPOC community and people of color. So I've heard during this live that you mentioned it a couple of times. I wanted to know that did you have any plans for maybe working on systemic racism? Because I feel like that's a issue that has been through our system when it comes to healthcare for Black women, when it comes to the system of the police, things of that nature, when it comes to even just like our jail system. Is there any plans that you have for that?
Absolutely. First of all, I would ask Cory Booker and Tim Scott to come into my office. They could bring whoever they wanted. We will not leave, I will tell them, until we have hammered out a bipartisan bill for police reform. It is absolutely outrageous that BLM was the single largest protest movement in the history of this country, and it did not lead to one fundamental police reform legislation. If you look at my and also want police reform goes beyond that. We need to look at the training of our police. All of that should be part of it. If you look at my website, marianne2024.com, look at my issues page, I do have a plan for reparations. That was part of my plan in my 2020 election cycle, and it is my plan now. There is a debt to be paid. You know, I've talked here about how we need to be transformational and not just transactional. Well, actually, when it comes to paying reparations for slavery, to me, it's a very transactional issue. There is simply a debt to be paid. My plan for reparations has to do with a council of Black elders. The money would be dispersed over a period of 20 years. It would have to be intergenerational. It would be Black leaders from culture, from the arts, from business, from real estate, from politics, from the sciences. And it would be up to Black people. I think if white people owe the money, I don't think it's up for white people to tell you how to spend it. So this council of elders would be given the power within the purview of educational and economic renewal. It won't fix everything, but I think that it will go far towards. I think that most Americans, first of all, I think most Americans are undereducated or uneducated or miseducated about the history of race in the United States. I think when people are informed, it's kind of a no-brainer. If you have almost 200 years of slavery, 250 years of slavery, plus another 100 years of institutional oppression of Black people in the American South, it's not a hard sell once people are in a serious conversation that there is a debt that is owed here. And also, I think most white Americans might not realize that if the wage gap was changed, if we actually close the gap between Black and white economically, our economy would be $1.5 trillion larger.
That's very true. And I did have another question for you when it comes to the reparations, because that was what I was going to ask you about as well. How do you see that that being funded? Where would those funds come from? Because they've calculated that the estimate of reparations that are owed to Black people in specific is about trillions of dollars. Yeah. So how would this be funded?
So this is the deal. If you look, it is estimated historically that there were probably between 4 and 5 million formerly enslaved people at the end of the Civil War. Every family, enslaved family of 4 was promised 40 acres and a mule. If you do the math, then yes, it would be trillions and trillions of dollars. Trillions and trillions of dollars is not politically feasible. I believe that $1 trillion, and I think I want white people to hear me when I tell you this. Some people say, oh, $1 trillion. If you have $858 billion that we pay every year in the defense budget, that's just slightly more than 1 year of defense spending. And I believe that it is reasonable. What I would want to do as president is to call Sandy Darity, Ta-Nehisi Coates, other people who have done such extraordinary work on this over the years, go to Camp David for the weekend, start fleshing out a plan. I would be willing to say, let's put $1 trillion on the table. Now, remember, Congress is the one that decides. You know, the president doesn't get to say, I promise you $1 trillion. But I believe that $1 trillion could be the amount of money that could be, I believe, could be sold to the American people. When you say, where do we get the money? It's like someone else asked that. We spent trillions on the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. We gave a $2 billion tax cut in 2017 that will never pay for itself. And by the way, once again, this money would be dispersed over a period of 20 years. And because it would be spent on economic and educational renewal, all of those things would actually ultimately put money into the U.S. Treasury.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for that. That's all the questions I had so far.
Good luck.
Thank you for
I
having
appreciate
me,
you coming on. Thank you so much.
Have a good one.
You as well. You as well. All right, everyone, we have one more person for tonight. I apologize to everyone we did not get to. I wish I could get to everyone here tonight, but it is getting later for Marianne and whatnot. So I appreciate everyone who did come on so far. We're going to get to the last person. We have RTP lined up. Again, I apologize to everyone I did not get to. I apologize, everyone, but we're going to go on to RTP for the last one here.
Hi, Miss Williamson. How are you? Sorry about the camera angle. This is awful. Thanks for staying up with us, Miss Williamson. I appreciate it. All right. So I'm a former Republican. I'm a former Christian. And I'm extremely leery of the way that propaganda and ideology can be used to sway an electorate. You've called abortion a moral issue, which you again talked about tonight, which leaves out the fact that many times it's a medical necessity. You've called COVID vaccinations for children draconian. You've listed GMOs as a source of...
I didn't say anything like that ever.
Okay, I had the... do you want me to pull... I could pull up the quote. We can just skip that if you'd like.
That was before COVID was here, and it wasn't about the vaccines. It was about mandates. So, excuse me, sir, but what you just said...
Sure. Everybody can look at that themselves then. You've listed GMOs as a source of corruption in our food system, despite overwhelming scientific disagreement that they're safe. And you've mentioned antidepressants and the research into biological factors existing simply because of the industry. So
I didn't say it existed simply because of the industry. No, I didn't.
So I quoted that exactly from your quote. But again, people could probably check that. My question is this. As a leftist, it's not only important that we can articulate our plans, but that we can actually implement our plans and build a coalition that will help us do that. I've seen no evidence that you have either. The coalition, your support seems to be waning. What plans do you have going into 2024 and up to the election that would make us think that we can lean on you and that you could build a coalition and that you could get the things that you're talking about actually into place?
First of all, you say my support is waning since you seem so into facts, although you're pretty slippery with them. There is no factual...
Well, with all due respect, I fact-checked all of this before. So
RTP, let's let her respond real quick.
That's number one.
Well, I'm going to respond if I get called out.
I have already said, whether or not I have a House and a Senate that will go along with my plans is not just whether I do something, but whether you do something. Whoever the president is, the president will be able to effectuate his or her agenda to the extent to which, number one, Congress goes along. That's true of, whether it's Joe Biden having to work with Kyrsten Sinema and Senator Manchin. It's the same thing. And as I said before, this will have to do with whether or not the American people elect someone. I also would hope that because of my conversation with the American people, that their own, and one of the things that it must change is we must change. Who we are must change. We must begin to see civic engagement and political activism as simply part of a well-lived, meaningful life. So I always say, some politicians will say, send me to Washington and I will fight for you. And that's the old model, much like you're saying, do you have the coalition? I don't want to go to Washington and fight for you. I want to go to Washington and co-create with you. I want to go to Washington and deal with factors there that are no different than people have to deal with in state houses throughout this country, whether it has to do with Concord, New Hampshire, whether it has to do with Sacramento, California, whether it has to do with Austin, Texas, or wherever. So I want to do in Washington what I want to do, what I need all citizens to do if you care about your community and your state and your country. Many of the issues we're dealing with today have to do with ground zero being in these states, much like when we're talking about women's reproductive rights. That's the coalition I'm building. The coalition I'm building is with the American people, and it is the American people in partnership with me who will ultimately have the power to move this away from the corporatist direction.
Sure, but how would us being on your side allow you to push legislation through, to advance your agenda, right? Because that still goes through Congress.
Of course, and that's as it should be. We don't have a king or a queen. The president does not have a magic wand. We don't want the president to have a magic wand. The president is one of three co-equal branches of government. Once again, and I've said this several times already, whether or not I will be able to effectuate certain aspects of my agenda will have to do with who's in the House and who's in the Senate. It will also, however, have to do with the pressure exerted by the American people. If I become president, that says to me the American people are in the mood for something new. They're in the mood for a difference. And I would hope that those who are attracted to my candidacy will not only work for my campaign, and I hope you will go to my site. I hope you will volunteer. I hope you will come to New Hampshire, canvass with us. I hope that you will make this happen with me. However, give equal attention to the people running for Congress in your district. Give equal attention if you're one of the 1/3 of states that have actual senatorial races in 2024. It's going to take more than any one election. It's going to take a real sort of evolutionary fervor. And I do believe, though, that as JFK said, those who make peaceful revolution impossible, make violent revolution inevitable. We must move things in a direction of real change in this country. Positive change, a change in the direction of greater justice and greater democracy, or to be honest, I fear what's going to happen in this country.
Thank you. And honestly, thank you. We don't get a lot of opportunities to talk to candidates. I think it's important sometimes to give the most pushback. I appreciate your willingness and your courage to walk onto a platform where you don't get to know what the questions are and take the questions. So I apologize I come as strong. We get one shot. And I think the people that at least are in my group, we want to hear the toughest questions we can possibly ask the candidates. I think you've done a good job tonight answering tough questions, and I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
I accept your apology.
Wow. Yeah, thank you.
Other people push back, but they push back with respect. Thank you for getting there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, RTP. Have a great night out.
Thank you.
Marianne, I really just want to say again, I appreciate it to follow on to what RTP said. Great thing answering all these questions. These were some pretty hard questions asked from people all across the debate space that of my generation and people who are older as well. So I'm really glad that you were able to answer all these questions. It's really, really cool to see how presidential candidates can interact with us, especially the younger of us, so that we can also be a part of this political process and to bring more younger people involved. So I really do appreciate that. This is a really cool thing. I just want to make that known. I really do.
Well, I appreciate you. Thank you for having me on. Thank you for giving me this opportunity, and I wish you and all of your followers well. And God bless. God bless. I said it.
You're good. Don't worry. I appreciate you coming on, Marianne. Have a fantastic night.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right, everyone. I appreciate everyone who did come on tonight. Today was an absolute wild live, a first time here on TikTok. I apologize to everyone I did not get to. Mark, I appreciate the galaxy. I wanted to get to as many people as I possibly can. I apologize, everyone. I literally would love to be able to get to everyone, but we do have time constraints and whatnot. Hopefully, everyone had a great night, everyone. I will be on tomorrow at my normal times around 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time is when I'm going to be live tomorrow. I appreciate everyone who came through, especially who has been here for the past 2.5 years before this even happened in the first place. One of the greatest things, honestly, I'm really stoked with what Debate Talk has done. This community has grown so much. I'm glad to see how much it's grown over the past 2.5 years. This I think is a testament to how much it's grown. So I'm glad that everyone is around here to see that with me as well. Appreciate the Disco Brawl. Appreciate the Had Mustache. If you want to see this interview, I am going to be posting this here on YouTube. You can check me out on YouTube, Parker Get a Job. So if you missed any point of this, make sure to look me up on YouTube, Parker Get a Job, or check me out, Linktree in my bio, Parker Get a Job. Appreciate the mystery firework. Thank you so much. Follow me if you haven't already. I go live literally every single day and debate people. This is making history. I appreciate everyone for coming on tonight. Jared, I appreciate the meteor shower. Thank you so much. I'm going to be going over to my third account or second account right now. I appreciate the gold mine. Thank you so much. You can look up Parker Get a Bible. That's where I'm going to be just talking to people. So if you want to come on and just see the after interview sort of conversations, you can make sure to do so right now. Again, Parker Get a Bible. Thank you everyone for all the gifts tonight. I appreciate it so much. Have a fantastic night, everyone. Again, Parker Get a Bible if you want to see the after interview, post interview conversations, everyone. Have a fantastic night, everyone, and peace out, y'all.